more time because I got interrupted by a call. Last video, yay. Okay, stop. In this chapter, on the Sublime, Debaton starts off with a brief origin of what sublimity is. He actually starts us off with some paintings of natural landscapes, and then talks about like the origin of Sublime as it came to be, starting in 200 AD with Longinus's treaty on the Sublime, and then the reinvigoration of being obsessed with like sublimity in the 1700s after a new translation emerged. He talks about how, like, I think it's the Romantics mostly were kind of obsessed with visiting the places that would give them feelings of sublimity. So this is like the Alps and like mountains, anything that would give you this like this certain feeling. Stop. So he, on his own travels, remarks on his trip to the Sinai Desert. The Sinai Desert, he was hoping to get from it this like one particular encounter. He says it's pleasurable and intoxicating, which posits human weakness in the face of the strength, age, and size of the universe. So he talks about like how the landscape not only has to be like this particular greatness, but it also needs to instill this feeling of greatness in you. He wants to feel these feelings of greatness make you it reminds you of like the smallness of what we are and the greatness of the vast universe. And Natasha, please stop. Quick. So places like deserts and mountain ranges are places where nature can just rule. Let's see. He talks a little bit about like God in the Old Testament, which is also seen as the most sublime book, which is so weird to me. And talking about like particularly Job and how Job has to like endure the suffering, and how sublimity is then linked to like the greatness of God. Some more religious stuff that I don't really understand. And then he has like, there's so many pictures in this chapter. It's really, truly beautiful. So he talks about how like if the world seems to be beyond our understanding, then sublimity kind of gives the explanation for why it's not surprising that things are this way, that things are supposed to be this way. We are essentially the smallest puzzle piece in the grand scheme of the thing. Let's see, so like while we have overwhelming lives, especially with all the stress and the fast time that we have, the sublimity and greatness of nature kind of reminds us of like who we are and what our place is. In chapter 7, he talks about art, and in this chapter let me see. Ooh, yes, I liked this one. So in this chapter he talks about Van Gogh a lot. So he talks about the way that when we go to places, we often look at them and we note that, you know, like they're pretty or they're not pretty, like they're beautiful. He was going to Provence, which is for like the rich people, I guess. So he wasn't looking for anything, he was just looking for like beauty, just like plain beauty. He wasn't looking for anything like spectacular, but just like beauty. So he actually kind of found it difficult to find these things that fit his aesthetic and what he was looking for. So he has like really low expectations. He's literally just looking for beauty. And the way that art functions in terms of the sublimity is when art is created, it kind of influences our perceptions of the place that is being depicted in the art. So when we see art of a certain place, it's more likely to influence where if we want to travel there or not. And so when he's talking about Provence, which is where he did visit, he starts talking about Van Gogh, who stayed in Provence through the end of his life. So when he was in Provence, he was highly prolific in terms of what he was painting, and Van Gogh was actually just like astounded with the beauty of Provence. It says that the particular place that he stayed there for 15 months and produced approximately 200 paintings, 100 drawings, and 200 letters. So this was thought of to be his greatest period. That his influences clearly were great because he was able to squeeze out that many paintings at the age of 35. So he painted stuff according to like his own influences. He painted with the colors, and he thought of things in the terms of the artists that he was influenced by. He talks about Velázquez and like Velázquez's grays, and he mentions specifically a little place that he goes to that he says this is Velázquez gray. This is exactly what he was talking about when he envisioned this and these colors. And so he says in here, it was for Van Gogh the mark of every great painter to enable viewers to see certain aspects of the world more clearly. But these aspects that he was able to see, that de Botton was able to see more clearly, come from these truly great painters that he speaks of. So he talks about, let's see, he says like a lot of the artists had failed to do justice to their subjects because they weren't realistic depictions, but that we all kind of have this like things that we focus on more than other things. And so what like one person might see as like being the focal point, another person might see something else as being the focal point and really like capture the spirit of it. So he says, which I think is really interesting, de Botton says on page 188, he says, if we in turn like a painter's work, it is perhaps because we judge that he or she has selected the features that we believe to be the most valuable within a particular scene. So if we like painters who focus on like the trees in a certain landscape, that it's probable that we also favor the trees, and that's why we're drawn to that kind of painting. So he says that there was a book on Van Gogh in the guest bedroom that he stayed at in Provence, and so he looked at the paintings that Van Gogh had done of things like cypress trees, and it really allowed him to more like open his eyes and really examine the cypress trees and the beauty that they were, and the beauty that they held, and he was able to look at the cypress trees in a different way. Like Van Gogh had kind of opened his eyes to them, which is fitting because the chapter's called Eye-Opening Art. And then he notices things that he like had missed earlier. So looking back at the art and thinking more of the things that he had previously missed allowed him to like really reflect on like why he thinks the things are beautiful and why he didn't initially look at it, and it kind of changes your perspective. He talks about the olive trees. Stop, please, get down. Oh, okay, so then he talks about like the Van Gogh Trail. So you can actually go and visit all of the places that Van Gogh had painted and depicted in his art, and it's called the Van Gogh Trail because you see all of the places. And so they have like little plaques, and you can see like the painting in contrast to like what it was that he was painting, and so you can see the like realisticness of it, or you can see the not realisticness of it. I don't know, I think it's very cool, and I didn't know there was a Van Gogh Trail, but I would really like to take it and like go on it now. I just think that sounds really interesting. Yeah, he spends like most of this chapter talking about Van Gogh, which is fine. I'm trying to get to the next section. So in the next section, he speaks of, what's his name? John Ruskin. So John Ruskin has a really interesting take on how to like possess and take with you the nature and the beauty that you see in the nature. So let's see. So de Botton says, a dominant impulse in encountering beauty is to wish to hold on to it, to possess it, and to give it weight in one's life. There is an urge to say, I was here, I saw this, and it mattered to me. And so he says one way to do this is through a camera, because taking photographs can kind of like soothe that itch for at least a moment. But John Ruskin's was to draw it. So this is kind of where he compares and contrasts his thing, talking about how he would always like reach for his camera to try to possess the place, but John Ruskin focuses more on the aspect of like drawing the thing to really capture it. Ruskin says that beauty is the result of the number of complex factors that affected the mind both psychologically and visually. Second, humans have an innate tendency to respond to beauty and the desire to possess it. There are many lower expressions of this desire for possession, including buying souvenirs, carving one's name on a pillar, and taking photography. There's only one way to possess beauty properly, and that is by understanding it, by making oneself conscious of the factors responsible for it. And then the most effective means of pursuing this conscious understanding is by attempting to describe beautiful places through art, by writing about or drawing them, irrespective of whether one happened to have any talent for doing so. So the mere attempt allows you to better understand the beauty that you took in and gives you a better way to possess it. Then he goes on to like why drawing is important to him and why he thinks that that's like the best way to do it. He says that Ruskin believed it could teach us to see, that is, to notice rather than merely look. So the process of recreating with our own hands what lies before our eyes, we seem naturally to evolve from observing beauty in a loose way to possessing a deep understanding of its constituent parts and hence more secure memories of it. Which I think initially when I was reading this I didn't really buy into, but if you really take the time to kind of understand the proportions and how something looks, then you start to get this deeper understanding of it, and it becomes something that's ingrained, and you look at a person every day that's important to you, and you really appreciate the small things about their beauty, whether it's like freckles or a blemish that's on their eyebrow or anything like that. Please get down. Let's see. Sorry, I lost my page number back here. Okay. He says, Ruskin gives like he talks a lot of shit about railroads and how they've really like deteriorated the landscape because they kind of just run through them. But his dilemma is genuine. He says, technology may make it easier to reach beauty, but it does not simplify the process of possessing or appreciating it. And so initially Ruskin thought nothing was wrong with like photography as a means of possessing beauty. The only reason that he felt that it started to decline in its ability to help us possess beauty is the people who like really got lazy, and instead of using photography to capture the things they were traveling to see, they were using it to supplement and substitute for traveling just by looking at photos saying like, oh, okay, I've seen it now because I was there, or versus like I've seen it because I saw it in a textbook once. Says photography alone cannot ensure such eating, but he speaks of like wanting to physically ingest the environment and take it with you where you go. So then de Botton tries to draw, and he says it's not very good, but it did lead him to kind of like rethink the places that had become habit to him, in terms of like he took better looks at them, and so he knew them by heart. Let's see. Okay, so he finishes this chapter out by saying, like de Botton says that he tried to make sense of pain and to fathom the sources of beauty while he was like on a road trip, and he says that Ruskin says, I believe that the sight is a more important thing than the drawing, and I would rather teach drawing to that my pupils may learn to love nature than teach the looking at nature that they may learn to draw. So he wants them to, instead of teaching them to draw, he more wants them to like learn how to observe and like really take in nature. The final chapter is called On Habit, and in this one, I also thought this one was kind of interesting when he talks about journeying around my bedroom, which is kind of similar to like what we did at the beginning of the semester when we had to like, please get down, I'm begging you. we had to like give a verbal tour of like a place that like we were familiar with, whether it was our bedroom or where we work or anything like that. And that's kind of how this one works with Demeister's work, who takes himself around his house and starts seeing things in a new light, remembering the things that the furniture that he lives with like do for him, like thinking about the memories on the couch and the little intricate details of the couch, despite the fact that it's the same couch he's had for so long. So then de Botton tried it, but he said it was too small, so he went and tried to do it with his neighborhood. And he says he was sensitive to the number of people on the pavement as potential impediments to his path. Their faces and expressions were invisible to me, as invisible as the shapes of the building or the activity in the shops. He says it had not always been thus. When he first moved to the area, his attention was jealously focused. He hadn't settled so firmly on the goal of reaching the underground quickly. So he, over time, kind of became more obsessed with like where he was going and not like what he was walking through to get there. And so that changed when he thought about like de Meister's like tour of his bedroom. Let's see. And then he says, which I think is really insightful, on page 248, he says it seemed to be an advantage to travel alone. Our responses to the world are crucially molded by the company we keep, for we may have particular visions of who we are and hence may subtly prevent certain sides of us from emerging. So, traveling alone allows us to more introspectively examine the things that we like without being like influenced or judged by anybody around us. And then he says the importance of de Meister, like though it might seem like really ridiculed to like look around your bedroom and like have that be like a tour or considered a tour, he says that overall he was gently nudging us to try, before taking off for distant hemispheres, to notice what we have already seen, because in habit we start to forget the things that we've seen and the things that we know because they become second nature to us, and we really stop and forget the beauty of the things around us. So yeah, that was de Botton's The Art of Travel. No more videos.